Happy New Year! Happy 2025! So excited to be here today. It's the second day of 2025, January 2nd. And wow, God is not disappointing. He's not disappointing me this year. He showed up on day one. Has God shown up for you? Did he show up on day one? My name's Wendy. I'm with Dream Big today. This is my new nugget. I am so excited. And I just was praying. I'm like, Lord, help me to be able to express to them how amazing you are. Because I've literally just stood in awe of God over the last 24 hours or so. So on December 31st, I thought to myself, I was like, when I read, I went, wow, Lord. I said, you're ending this year with a bang. It was almost like God did like a microphone drop on December 31st, like boom, there it is, right? It was so awesome. And I was like, yes, it was just so good. And then January 1, I open my Bible and I start reading, and oh my goodness, immediately God starts showing me new things I had never seen before, and things I promised you I would never see on my own. He started showing me, so I love to find patterns, and the patterns of God and the symbolisms and stuff. And so he starts showing me how we can relate all of these things to us. And he showed me, and I can't go into detail, I wish I had more time, but just in Genesis 1, he showed me the plan of salvation. It was amazing. And how it applies to us personally. Like as an individual, our plan of salvation from creation all the way until we rest with him again in heaven. It was just incredible. And then chapter 2 was the old covenant versus the new covenant and how Christ fulfills it. And this is what God is showing me in my reading, right? And I'm just blown away. All yesterday, I'm like, holy cow, this is absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. Plus, there's so much more. But then today, when I start reading today, it's Genesis 3, and he shows me that this is the process of sin. How we become deceived. It all starts with a lie from the devil, how we become deceived, and how we can be redeemed from it. It's the process of sin. It was absolutely incredible to me. And then in Genesis chapter 4, I start reading and I was like, wow, Adam and Eve, they have kids. One's good, one's bad. I'm like, this is us. This is the church. And that we have a choice. We have a choice. Do we want to live for God? Do we want to have an acceptable or a not acceptable sacrifice to God in our lives? What do we want to bring? Do we want to be acceptable or not acceptable? And that one thing I do want to talk about is that Cain chose to bring a not acceptable sacrifice. And then when God didn't accept it, he was mad. It's almost like, this pride or arrogance of like, well, why didn't you accept mine? I'm pretty awesome type of thing, right? But then it says that Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod. And as I was relating it to me in my life, I thought, wow, Cain settled. Do we settle? And I thought he didn't just settle in the land of Nod, he settled for living outside of God's presence. And I looked up the definition of settle because I had two different applications of it in my mind then, right? And I was like, wow, first he decided he was going to live in that sin. He was going to live there. He was going to make that his home, outside of God's presence. He was going to get used to it, even comfortable in it. He was going to build on and around that life of sin. And that's what he did. The second one, he settled in his heart because he accepted less than the best. He accepted living outside of God's presence. And, we settle in our hearts when we live in the life of sin by accepting less than the best, thinking that maybe that's all we deserve, Or maybe that's what we want. We think, oh, this is what we want, not realizing that we're settling and that we could have so much more with God. Number 3, settling the debt. Cain was punished for his sin and was out there striving to settle the debt on his own, which he could never do. We need Christ to settle the debt for us. And another definition of settling is this sinking gradually to the bottom. And Cain settled because of his sin, and he had to leave his life with God up here, exalted or, enlightened and having God with him, even us having the Holy Spirit as our guide and our comforter and all these wonderful things. And he lowered himself and stepped down from that presence of God. He settled to live a worldly life. And now he has to face all the world and the threats alone because he's settled to the bottom. And then the 5th definition of settle is to become fixed, resolved, or established. And I thought he became resolved and determined to live in that life of sin and to live that way. And then he ends up teaching it to his children, and it becomes this perpetual generational thing. And so God is showing me all of this, and I'm just blown away. And I thought, wow, the verse 25 of Genesis chapter 4 today, it shows that Adam and Eve ended up having Seth. And so I see this generational thing, Cain with his family and this life of wickedness, and then Adam and Eve who are striving to do what's right. They have been made clean by the blood of the Lamb. God covered them with the skins of the Lamb, right? The shedding of blood, and covered them. And now they're trying to live a good life, a righteous life, and trying to raise their children righteously in the presence of the Lord. And I just wrote at the end of all of my pages of notes and everything, what example are we going to set, and what will we choose? What will we choose? And then as I continue to read on in Matthew and Psalms and Proverbs, I mean, it all just goes together. Psalms, our choices have consequences, whether it's good or bad. Will we receive the inheritance of the Lord or become his enemy? And then Proverbs, will we heed the Lord and his teachings or be a fool and ignore and reject it and settle to the bottom and settle living outside of his presence? I don't know. I've just been absolutely blown away. But one thing I can tell you is that God is greater. He loves us beyond what we could ever imagine. He has amazing things in store for you. If you haven't seen him show up yet in 2025, be diligent and faithful. Read the word and let him show up, because he will. He will show up. And you know what? He's going to start showing up in ways that you would never imagine, because he's so faithful with his unfailing love. He keeps his promises. He's just amazing. And let us just be wise, heed the counsel, learn from him, and live that higher life. Live walking in awe of God, full of joy, full of contentment, full of satisfaction in the Lord. That's how I feel today. And that's my prayer for every one of you. And I thank you for being with me today. And I just pray God's greatest blessings on you. I pray that 2025 be an amazing year of abundance and joy, and that we can be genuine in all that we do, in our worship of God, in our friendships, in our family, in our love. And I just hope that you have a wonderful year, and I hope that you have the best day today. And I thank you for joining me. All right, have a wonderful day.